the biggest things that I've noticed gamers struggling with is finishing games. You go to start up a game and maybe you're excited about it, but then there's always the potential of starting up other games. And so you end up in this cycle of, oh, there's a game, oh, there's a game, oh, that game, you can't finish the game that's in front of you. I've found that there's typically two places that these potentially distracting games will come from. The first place is from your backlog. You're always wanting to work on that backlog, and so it can be tempting to be like, what if I, dive into this game and get this one started? The other main place it comes from is adding new games to your collection. Now, being retro gamers, obviously we add old games, but they're new to us since we just brought them into our collection. Of course, that temptation is going to be there to play something that you just got. Something that I've talked about before on this channel is how gamers will often add games to their collection faster than they can actually play them, or more specifically, faster than they can finish them. And so what essentially happens is you get these new games in, you don't have time to finish all of them, but you want to play them, or at least try them out, so you kind of play them for like 10 or 15 minutes, maybe more than that, but in a lot of cases, not enough time to finish them. I always find it funny when people have a particularly large collection and they say, oh yeah, I've played every game in my collection, when in actuality what that probably means is for some of those games they put it in, they powered it on, and they kind of saw what it was about for a few minutes and then took it out, put it back, and never played it again. And as always, like I say, if that's what you like to do, then more power to you. Go for it. That's what you should do if you enjoy doing things that way. But people are very honest about saying that they wish they could finish more games than they actually do. And so that's why we're talking about finishing games. Now, when it comes to finishing retro games in particular, the conversation has a bit of a unique flavor to it. Thing is, retro games are hard to beat a lot of times. So it's not just a matter of having enough time to beat a game, it's being able to be good enough at that game to beat it. I mean, somebody could spend their entire life trying to beat Battletoads and it could just never happen. Now, of course, in theory, the more you play a game, the more you can practice it and therefore probably get better at the game, but my point is, it's just no guarantee. And here's another thing, when you're playing a game and you meet that point of resistance, whether it's a boss that you just cannot beat, or you're in a game where you just don't know where the heck to go next. Even if you can look up where to go or practice that boss more until you are good enough to beat it, you still might just be discouraged enough in that moment to say, hey, I got this other game, I'll just play that instead. It really does take dedication to finish a game in a lot of cases. I mean, you almost got to kind of force yourself to do it. But then once you get to that point, if you feel like you're forcing yourself to do something, what are we doing at that point? I mean, these are video games. The idea is to be fun, right? So if you feel like you're forcing yourself to do something, what's the point of that? Well, here's the thing. Finishing games can be very satisfying. It really all comes down to just forming a habit, and getting in that habit can make it very fun to play that way. Because here's the thing. When you're playing a game and you want to finish it, you got to have what I like to call the just a little bit further mindset. Now, the way this works is, say you're playing like Shinobi or something like that, and you die on stage 2 at this certain part. You're like, okay, well, I got the checkpoint, so I'm going to get back to where I was and try to get just a little bit further. And that mindset can make the game very addicting, where you always just want to see if you can get a little bit further. The next thing you know, you're invested in that game, and that is the key. You're thinking about it all day the next day until you get to play that game again, thinking, oh, I want to see what this next level is, or get to this next part. That really is the key, that investment, because when you feel like you're forcing yourself to play a game, it's because you're not invested. Now, if you never end up getting invested in the game, that can happen, but you gotta at least give yourself a chance for the possibility of it. For example, I've recently been playing Demon's Crest, and I've been really enjoying it, but initially when I tried to play the game, this was years ago, I didn't really give it the proper chance. I kind of played it for a little bit, didn't quite understand the gameplay structure, the level structure, the way it all came together. But I recently sat down with it, gave it a fair chance, and I love it. I really understand what the game's trying to do, and it is a blast. Now, when it comes to people who dedicate themselves to games in order to finish them, there's no better example that I can think of than Jake. Now, who is Jake, you may be asking? Well, Jake is a longtime viewer of this channel and somebody I talk with on and off quite a bit. And every single time I talk to Jake, when he's talking about playing a game, he's also talking about having beaten it. And I'm like, oh my goodness, you beat it already? And he's like, yeah, just matter-of-factly, because that's what he does. Even for retro games that can be really challenging, he will just play it until he's beaten it. For example, I recommended him Rocket Knight Adventures. Now, you all know how much I love Rocket Knight Adventures. So I recommend the game to him, and he plays it, and he's like, yeah, I finished it. It was great. I'm like, you finished it already? I played that game on and off for like 5 or 6 years before I finally finished it. I'd love going back to it and just playing it up to a certain point, and then finally I did beat it at some point. But he just beat it like the first weekend he played it. I was like, oh my goodness, nobody does it better. So if you want to finish your games, it would be a mistake to not game like Jake. Another big problem that I notice people running into all the time is, say you start a game and you play it for a while, and as tends to happen, you get away from it for a while. And then when you go to come back to that game, you fire it up and you're like, okay, wait a second. What the heck was I doing? Where am I? What's going on in this story? I'm completely lost. Typically, this will happen in specific kinds of games, namely longer adventure, perhaps RPG type of games, where there's a story, there's a plot, there's a progression of where you need to go and remembering what you've done so that you're not just backtracking into random places trying to figure out what to do. It could also happen in a game like Super Metroid, where you're trying to manage this very elaborate map and figure out where to go and have, certain upgrades to get to certain spots. And you could just come back in and load up that map and be like, I can't remember where I've been or what I should be looking for next. So in any case, this could be enough to make you feel like you have to start the game over again, which might make you just say screw it, or it might make you feel like you have to invest some time to get yourself caught back up so that you remember where you are and what you should be doing, and that could also be enough to make you just say screw it. Plus, the investment and momentum you had built up from playing that game is gone at that point, and so you're going to need to spend time building that back up again so that you're really interested and into the game. But that about does it for my thoughts. Of course, I want to hear how all of you deal with trying to finish your games. Is it a really big problem? Have you found out some clever ways to deal with it? What is your, I guess you would say, strategy for coping with this sort of thing? So be sure to leave those comments down below, and I will see ya in the next video.
He's the retro bird, yeah. And he's talking about video games. He's the retro